Hey guys, this is Adam Amble from the A to G Show 2.0, episode 15, about ready to start in 1 minute. Tonight we discuss if Colin Cowherd should be president of the NCAA football, Big Ten changing its schedule, faith in college football even happening this fall, and what has been some of the pros and cons of sports during the quarantine, plus a little bit of Spitfire. We're bringing it back, so join in the fun and welcome to the A to G Show 2.0. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to episode 15 of the A to G Show 2.0. I am Adam Amble, coming to you live from beautiful Castle Rock, Colorado. It's a rainy Tuesday evening tonight. Hope you all had a great weekend, and the start of the week has been spectacular for you. G actually had some traffic issues down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, so I'm not sure if he'll be able to join us tonight. Hopefully he can join in on the chat here in a little bit once he gets back to his hotel. I'm sure he's having a blast over there on the beach. But yeah, unfortunately he couldn't be joining us tonight. So make sure to comment and we can have a nice discussion like we did last week. It was a good time last week. We actually made the show go by pretty quick and almost made it the full hour. So I'm just going to try to wing it again tonight, but I appreciate everyone tuning in. And don't forget, after the show, to make sure to head on over to the M Factor YouTube channel and make sure to subscribe. We really appreciate it. There's a link in the description, so click on that, leave us a like, and of course, if you missed your show tonight or just want to watch it again, it will be posted on the M Factor page later tomorrow as usual. And hey, guess what? If you want to scoop up some Michigan or M Factor merch, head on over to the M Factor merch store. We got some newly designed attire published this week. Really appreciate the support and supporting the M Factor. It really helps us get the brand out there. And if you've already purchased your favorite item, make sure to head on over there again. There is new stuff most of the time weekly, so go check that out. We really appreciate it. And if you're joining us right now, don't forget to hit the share button so everyone can join in on the fun, not just friends of myself and whatnot. But yep, just go ahead and hit that share button so we can get it out there to all of Facebook. We really appreciate it again. It's just going to be me tonight from Castle Rock, Colorado. But let's get right into it. Make sure to leave your comments over there. But let's roll right into our weekly Colin Cowherd discussion. It's kind of been a great, I'll say, tradition the last 3 to 4 weeks of something that Mr. Cowherd has said. Again, I love his show. He's one of my favorite sports reporters, sports shows, I guess you would say. And this last week, he kind of had a nice little, let's just say a nice little rant about how he could be the NCAA college football president with some simple rules. Now, we do actually have those listed up here, I do believe. Let's head on over to that screen right there. Apologize for the off-center. Again, it's just me tonight. So, unfortunately, Colin's college football platform. Now, some of these I really agree with. I'm not sure if they would really hurt the sport at all, but especially, after the past couple of years, I can kind of agree with a lot of these. I know for a fact, number 5, only 12 bowl games. The bowl games have just been ridiculous. Now, I know there's a lot of sponsorship that's involved in this. I know a lot of companies pay big money for this, but in my opinion, you should have only the major bowls, in terms of the typical, you got your big, the Rose Bowl, Orange Bowl, Citrus Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Cotton Bowl. You got all these bowls. You got 12 bowl games. That's a decent amount of bowls, actually. But, you got to think that's 24 teams. And let's face it, are you really tuning in December 20th to watch the weird sun-kissed orange Pineapple Bowl. I don't think so. You're really watching the Big Mac Bowl. You're not really watching. Are you tuning into these? Let me know what your guys' opinion is on this, because in my opinion, a lot of these bowls and a lot of these teams you don't want to see. I mean, you're really gonna give a team with a 6-6 record, and heck, even in the past couple years, there's been some 5 or 6 win, sub 500 teams that have been invited to these bowl games, and sometimes the coaches and the ADs and the athletic department says, "Hey, guess what? We don't really want to go. We don't feel like giving our team the benefit of the doubt to say, hey, we don't feel like giving our squad, when you're sub 500, I mean, that's just ridiculous. We don't feel like rewarding our football team for having basically a terrible year, right? That's kind of my opinion on the bowl game scenario right there. I don't disagree so much with the 12 bowl games. I think they could really limit it down. And again, I know it gets some lesser teams, but hey, the smaller teams just they've been irrelevant for years, right? Just years and years and years. Does give them a chance to get out there and recruit, but let's face it, how long is it going to have to take before these teams really benefit from going to these less than decent bowl games? I really think that this is a good point on really limiting it to 12 bowl games. But let's go to number 1 on the list, and that's no neutral site games. This one I 100% agree with. You don't need to go to the Cowboys. You don't need to go to Jerry's World, right? That's ridiculous. Why would you need to go to Jerry's World? He's got enough money. He doesn't need to pack in that stadium, and you're taking away from one or the other. I love the home and home series thing that they got going on. I've always been a fan of that, but these neutral site games, I know Michigan has played they played Florida a couple years ago, came out on top. They played Alabama at Jerry's World. When was that? About 10 years ago. Probably is 10 years ago by now, but 8 to 10 years ago, and just got shellacked by Alabama. And playing these neutral site games really take away from the home atmosphere that you get for college football. I don't want to see these teams play in these NFL stadiums. I want the bands. I want the home team, the home crowd at these stadiums. There was a couple years ago too when Wisconsin, it wasn't even a neutral site game. They played at Lambeau Field. I don't like that. They played LSU at Lambeau Field, basically a home game, but why not just have it over in Madison? That's absolutely ridiculous. You're trying to get these players, to play in iconic stadiums and whatnot. I mean, let's face it, some of these college football stadiums, in my opinion, are much better than these pro stadiums. I don't think these kids need exposure to NFL stadiums. I don't think that's the case. I think you get these pro stadiums, these NFL owners that are paying these college football teams to do this. The TV obviously loves it, right? The media obviously love it. But I think it's ridiculous to go play at these neutral sites. These neutral sites, I just think it's kind of ridiculous. We got some comments to get to real quick. Steve Fox, thanks for joining in. Steve, bowl games serve the purpose of getting teams an extra month of practice and, of course, the money. Yeah, that's kind of what I alluded to earlier. Just they do get the money. I mean, how much do they get, though, from some of these lesser bowls? Again, some of these sponsors I've never even heard of, for crying out loud. They're definitely more local sponsorships, right? I think that's what the deal is right there. I like the non-cupcake, non-conference games. Yep, we'll keep going through this real quick, Steve. Eggs, good to see you, buddy. Zach Egley, agreed. College universities are better atmosphere than pro stadiums. And Steve, I'll get to your next comment here in a second once we get through them all. I'll read your comments after we're done, or I'm done with my little rant right here. Number 2, only one non-Power 5 opponent. Steve, that's kind of what you just alluded to. That's absolutely right. Some of these games, I do know, again, it goes back to the payday, right, of these smaller universities, these smaller colleges really getting that payday and really getting in. I remember, what was it? Back in the mid-'90s, I believe it was, when Central Michigan went down to play Danny Werfel in Florida, and they lost like 82-3 or something like that. However, they made more money in that one game than they would have if they would have sold out their entire home schedule. Very important to Central. Well, I'm going to say we can't really put any numbers to that or any opinion to that, because who knows, that could have funded. They got great facilities over there at Central. Their indoor football practice center, their weight room is second to none, especially for a MAC school. And you really don't know. A lot of that money could have went into a lot of those buildings and a lot of the facilities at Central Michigan. Let's face it, football programs are the cash cow for for most of these universities, right? I can't think of any school, maybe Duke, that maybe the basketball program, Duke, maybe Kentucky. I don't know that, but Kentucky's, they're still SEC, so it's really tough to say. Most, I would say 99% of D1 universities in football and basketball, their cash comes from the football squad. I don't think anyone would deny that or argue against that. So I think it's difficult to say. It's difficult to say if these games are so important for the lesser schools, for the smaller schools, for the the less schools. Sometimes they get on TV, especially nowadays. If you're playing Michigan and you're a MAC school, or you're just like last year, Middle Tennessee State, those teams, they never get to really play on TV. But that game was on the Big Ten Network. It was a night game for those kids going to the big house. I think absolutely that was fantastic for them, right? I think absolutely that was something that they'll always remember. And let's face it, they actually gave them kind of a run, gave the Wolverines a run for their money in the first quarter of the game, right? So good for them. And my thing is, I don't like being a fan of a major university, of a good football squad, of a Big Ten school, of a Power Five conference team. I don't like it. It's a waste. I hate how the SEC does it too. You got Alabama playing schools that some people have never even heard of, playing the Citadel or who knows, some of these squads, especially in the middle of the season. I know the SEC has kind of been notorious for that the past decade, of playing, kind of definitely a cupcake squad, a cupcake team in the middle of their schedule. Now, don't get me wrong. That's pretty smart by the SEC to do this, right? The SEC juggernaut of a schedule in conference play. But when you really, let's face it, when you look at some of their non-conference opponents, they have been trying to pick it up a little bit. Even Saban says, remember when last year he was complaining, in the year before, he was complaining how they couldn't even get students to the games for those cupcake games, and rightfully so. They'd much rather stay out in the parking lot, tailgate, maybe turn it on the radio as a little background noise, but you'd rather party. The game is going to be over basically at kickoff, right? So I can understand why some of the bigger schools really want to do this, but I don't really. I'm not going to sit here and say that I can't say for certain why the smaller schools would definitely hurt from this. That's definitely a case to be made. And moving on to number 3, everyone plays 10 conference games. Yeah, that kind of goes on to only one non-Power 5 opponent, right? I think you'd end up playing you'd end up playing two non-conference games. So you'd have one non-Power 5 opponent, and then probably just one cupcake game, as opposed to basically 3 now is what you get if you're in a Power 5 conference. You can play nine conference games and get those 3 cupcake squads. So everyone plays 10 conference games. That's great. Keep it in your conference. That's the reason why you have the conference in the first place, right? Let's see. Number 4, college football playoff won't expand beyond 4 teams. This has been an argument. You can go either way. Let me know your guys' opinion on this. But this is absolutely, I could go either way on this one. I understand the pros and cons of the 4 team. I understand the pros and cons of 8, of 16. I personally, despite being a homer for Michigan, of course, I personally like the 4-team playoffs. It's very rarely. I can see maybe going to 8, because every once in a while, the argument is, well, the 15, for a fact that there's 3 teams that are going to win the championship, right? But there's always an argument that if the 5th team, sometimes there's been that 5th team that's been left out that could compete, right, against the number 1 seed, typically Alabama, Clemson, an SEC school, or an ACC, or Clemson out of the ACC. But you can really make an argument to say, okay, some of those years, the 5th seed, which would have been the 5th seed, might have been able to compete. So what do? You make it 6? Do you make it 8? I don't know. I would have to say I'm still a big fan of the 4 team. Again, it makes every game just like it did in the past, right? When back in the early days, before I was born, or actually probably right, 80s, 70s, 60s, where you could only go to the Rose Bowl and you couldn't go back-to-back years, right? It was if you had one loss and you weren't going to a bowl game. So it's literally the same. And imagine it's just that much more intense every weekend, and I love that. That's the best thing that college football has going for them. That's one of my biggest arguments about keeping it at the four-team playoff, simply because that it makes the sense of urgency in the season that much greater. You have to win all of your games. There's no choice. It's very rare that unless all the teams lose one game, you're basically going to have two probably legitly undefeated teams and then a one-loss team, and that one loss probably came against a top 10 squad, right? So if you lose a game that to a team that finishes outside the top 10 in that season, you're not making the playoffs. Now that is, and to me, that's what separates college football from NFL football, right? You can lose a weekend, you can lose, one or two games. Heck, you could even lose 3 games in a row, still make the playoffs in your conference. And I think that really takes away some of the excitement from weekend to weekend in the NFL. Of course, being a Lions fan, it's tough. We don't really consider we're never in the playoff hunt anyway, really, so it doesn't matter. But I just think that for college football, I really think that it's what sets college football apart is the sense of urgency and the sense of just absolute sheer destruction if you lose one of those games. And I think that's where that's where I lean on the four-team playoff system. I really think that benefits in my terms of excitement from weekend to weekend. Now imagine you take that four-team football, you take that four-team playoff, and you say only one non-power 5 opponent. Holy smokes, that means you only have one weekend that's kind of a gimme, right? And then you have 10 conference games, and especially in a Power 5 conference where, especially the Big Ten and SEC, where top to bottom, you could, there's a couple teams there, but you could theoretically lose one of those games that a bottom tier Big Ten team that you were supposed to win, right? You were favored by 3+ touchdowns, and that team, if it's at any stadium in the Big Ten, if it's an away game, there's no real easy place to play in the Big Ten. A lot of these stadiums, the student sections are great. There's a lot of stadiums that maybe I would say, if I had to pick one, maybe Rutgers. Obviously, at Rutgers isn't that tough, and then Indiana, despite being a good team, especially in the past couple of years, a solid team, they really don't pack the stadium very often, which is too bad. And I'm not sure about Maryland. I really haven't reviewed, but every other team in the conference, every home game, they probably sell out, and Michigan State, they never sell out. Their upper dish is always empty, right? But despite that, there's hold on 1 second. We'll get to some, I think Steve Fox, 8 teams would balance recruiting a little better. Yeah, I mean, I can see that point, Steve, and I don't 100% disagree with that. The only thing that I would say to an 8-team balancing recruiting a little better is, even when they didn't have the playoff system, didn't you technically still have, these dynasties that would just absolutely dominate? My thing is, you still have kind of, in terms of ratings, recruiting. I mean, look, you got Michigan in the top 10 every year. Do they finish in the top 10 every year? Not necessarily. So I think in recruiting aspects, I think it might even it out a little better, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to dictate the outcome, right? You still got to develop those players. I just think if you look at years past, before we even had the playoff system, you'd still have the top tier teams that would, especially when we had the BCS system, right? I still think you would have a lot of those squads or a lot of those teams and universities that would really recruit really well. I mean, you got Ohio State, you got Michigan, you got Alabama, you got the probably Notre Dame, you got Texas, you got a lot of these, Oklahoma. You got the top 10 tier schools that are always going to be solid in recruiting. And I'm not sure if expanding and getting a little more coverage for the top 8 teams, because they still go to some really good bowl games. The 4 teams that are left out, just Michigan last year when it played Alabama, for crying out loud. That's insane. I don't think Michigan had any business really playing Alabama, even though they hung in there with them for the first half, the first half or so. So I don't totally disagree with that. I just don't know if it would really help the outcome of what would happen. You're still going to have that fifth team or that fourth or fifth team. And once the playoff starts, you already know you can just throw out that fourth or fifth team, right? The majority of the time. There are, like I mentioned, there are some years to, hey, guess what? That number 5 team, hey, guess what? They have a shot. They could hang in there just because of the schedule they played and the loss or two that they may have had. So that's where I'm getting at with that. I think Steve Fox says, I think Alabama, OSU, Oklahoma, and Clemson are so far ahead of everyone else recruiting wise. I would agree, unless you go back to the rankings, right? When you go back to the rankings, yes, they're always, but Michigan's kind of right behind Ohio State. Again, is this coaching? Is this the type of players that we're actually going after? It's tough because everyone at Ohio State seems to really mature and develop. And then you got, Michigan, I think is number 7 this year so far, or for next year, number 7, 6 or 7. And there's been years, especially with Harbaugh, that they've beat Ohio State in recruiting. Not many, but at the same time, do we just not develop them correctly? If that's the case, I don't want to knock Harbaugh because I love the guy, but at the same time, is it just the development of these players? I'm not really sure, but that's Colin's college football platform, and I'll be honest, not too much of disagreement there. There's some flaws to it, and hopefully we'll get back to another one of Mr. Cowherd's discussions next week, but so far this week he hasn't really thrown anything out there to really discuss. So I think this was a pretty solid list, and we're gonna head on to the next topic. Again, thanks everyone for joining the A to G Show 2.0 tonight. I'm flying solo. G, I think, might be still stuck in traffic over there in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, but thanks everyone for joining tonight. Bear with me. We got another couple great topics to get to, and the next one is it was announced last week that the Big Ten conference will cancel all non-conference football games, and that's a real bummer simply because I was really looking forward to that opening game, Michigan-Washington at Washington. I know we play absolutely terrible on the West Coast, but I think this was the year, Washington a little down. I think it would have been a fight, especially being we're going to have a new quarterback, right? Whether it be Milton or McCaffrey. Hey, speaking of Michigan, don't forget to go pick up your little 2020 football preview from the Wolverine. It's really great. A lot of good information in there, but I think it was only like $12. So that's my plug for the Wolverine.com. That just came in the mail last week, so I was pretty excited to read through that. A lot of good information. But, yeah, you can see our boys McCaffrey and Milton on the front there. So we'll have to see. It's going to be interesting, especially if they don't have any – it's going to be – I mean, they need to start working out, right? It's getting to be crunch time. So JC, sorry, buddy. I just saw you on here. One comment about the last topic. Go to 6 teams, give 1 and 2 a bye. Going to 6 teams will give someone like Boise State or UCF a chance, which only 4 teams they will never get in. Yeah, that's kind of true. And that's, 6 teams I was thinking with a bye. Yeah. Again, I just think it would stop them from whining. You know what I mean? Like UCF, they would have no business playing Alabama, especially when they went with Scotty Boy Frost there. They would have no business playing Alabama. So, again, you would have been like, okay, just put them in just so we could stop the debate. Oh, they deserve to be in over a one-loss Big Ten or SEC school. It's nonsense. So, JC already read mine. Cover to cover, I bet you did. Does Sparty come out, or is it just like a little paper brochure? I'm sure the production value on the Sparty preview is pretty thin. So yeah, you might want to take a look at it, JC. Get some education on there. I'm sure you're bored, so get in there on that. But back to the topic. Canceling these non-conference football games, meaning no Michigan, no Washington. Michigan versus Washington the first week of the season it was supposed to be. Now, I do not really disagree with this. I think it's something that had to be done for player safety. I think what the NCAA and what these conferences are probably trying to do, and I mean, I'm sure you guys can all see it too. Try to limit this thing down to region by region. What is happening in California obviously is not happening, in the Great Lakes region, for example. It's something totally different. And how each area wants to manage the virus and manage how they want to bring people to the games. Travel. You might have to. Even though people are traveling all over the place now, it's crazy to me that you can still fly on a plane, but California, I think, just shut down all their business, a lot of the businesses again. Very, very odd to me, but I think they're just trying to limit to the region. Now, the argument could be made like, okay, so Nebraska can go all the way out to New Jersey, out to Rutgers. I don't know. I don't even know if they're on the schedule, but you might have to change it. I think there's going to be a interconference schedule mix-up. Basically, I really think that they're gonna flip-flop the schedule. There's been talks of playing just half the season in early fall and then the other half in the spring. We'll get into that into a second, but that would mean that there's been speculation of playing Ohio State early October, which would just be crazy to me. You might have to head back to Michigan, head back to the bar and grill if it's open, hopefully, and watch that game. Would be just crazy to play Ohio State in the middle of the season. Might help, actually, because not all the hype, maybe. And I'll be honest with you guys, if you guys haven't noticed this, I'm going to go over on the M Factor podcast for the season preview, but we seem to peak about roughly 3/5 of the way through the season, and then we kind of nosedive right at the end, right? We kind of take a while to get going, and then boom, we just have great games. Last year, look at it: Michigan State, Notre Dame, Indiana. Same thing the year before. We just go on this hot streak, and then boom, kind of we falter off like that a little bit in the last half of the game before Ohio State lose to Ohio State, actually get destroyed by Ohio State the last couple of years, and then just kind of go to the bowl game just with nothing to play for. So maybe it's a Harbaugh style of peaking kind of, roughly halfway, 3/5, 2/3 of the way through the season, and then, we just kind of falter off. So who knows? Maybe a schedule system like that, maybe move Ohio State to, the middle of the season, right? That'll work out. But you might see something like that within the conference. You might have to cancel games. Obviously, I think you should add games. Personally, I think you get back to, okay, who does Michigan add to their schedule because they're losing those 3 games, right? I think they still should try to play the 12 games, whether it be 6 in the fall, 6 in the spring. I'm not a huge fan of playing in the spring. Simply because I think that if you're going to tell me that player safety is the main goal here, well, based on the statistics, the flu seems to be more deadlier than the COVID to people under 25, especially people under 20. So these athletes, I think you're putting them in more harm's way if you, especially for injury, for crying out loud, if you break up the season from the fall, 6-7 games, and then you have an off season basically of 2-3 months, and then you get right back at it in the spring for actual football. I know we have spring practice and spring games and whatnot, but you guys all know that that's totally different. I'm not so sure that if we're going to have the player safety or the student student athletes health involved in this, I think that it's actually worse to split up the season, right? These kids are in some cases, it looks like non-conspiracy theory right here, but it looks like a lot of some universities, some programs are trying to get the virus on purpose so they can try to be immune to it during the season, so they don't get it during the season, so there's no outbreak during the season. Okay, so I mean, think about that when you're thinking about player safety. You got people they're probably going to their doctors and their physicians and be like, yeah, there's not much of a risk. Get it, take care of yourself for the couple days. I mean, these people are in the best shapes of their lives, and then they're talking, oh well, let's split up the season and put these players' bodies through hell for the 6-7 months, you know what I mean? From September all the way through, who knows, next May? Is that what we're talking here? It's tough to say. So I just really don't think that that's the answer. I really would think they're going to wait. You got to remember, what are we, about a month and a half, just over a month and a half from when the first games are supposed to start, right? And I really wish that they would reschedule some of the Big Ten games. Boom, replace that Washington game. So we are playing Labor Day weekend as usual. I think that would be fantastic. Of course, that's what I want. I'm sure that's what all you want. Everyone wants sports to get back. Everyone wants it. Especially we want an NCAA football season. Can be weird without fans there, but I mean, we'll see. It's changing every day. That's the thing. It is changing from day to day. You got conferences having meetings. They're so in limbo right now, and of course that's the way it should be. You got to wait for more information to come out. As we get more and more cases, obviously the death rate continues to basically the death rate lowers. We're getting a spike from a couple of weeks ago, the spikes in terms of deaths across the country, but you really got to wait and see. I mean, if that death rate continues to go low and it continues to be below like 0.2%, 0.03% for younger player or younger people that are these athletes, 25, 24, 23-year-olds and below, probably 22-year-olds and below, right? If it proves to not be an issue with them, take care of the staff, obviously, and let's see what we got. But I just think, again, they're just waiting on more and more data, which is a smart thing to do. And that basically kind of leads us into the topic number 3. Real quick, Steve Fox with a comment. MLB and NBA have to start and continue in order for the football. Excellent point. That's an excellent point. NBA kind of set the tone when they shut down their season, right? Everyone kind of followed suit after the NBA shut down. I think you're going to see the exact same thing with them firing back up, right? I know they're in a bubble. NBA, I'll be honest, Steve, probably NBA is a little different because they're indoors. You know what I mean? I continue to gripe on the indoor thing. I think indoors is tough because it's. I know there's no fans, but indoors, you seem to be just confined. You're recycling that air-conditioned air, and I think that's a little worse, a little more higher risk. And NBA players, of course, are older, right? A lot of them have families that are, that could be susceptible, that could serve as a higher risk for the virus. So, but I don't disagree with that, especially MLB baseball, considering they're not in one stadium or one area, right? They'll actually be traveling around, but they're outdoors. And if there ever was a sport where you could social distance, it's definitely baseball, right? So again, I don't disagree with that. I just feel like they definitely have to try to get it right, and you're gonna have cases. I just hate this. I'm not a huge fan of the media narrative right now, to where all we're reporting on is cases, and no one's really looking at the deadliness of the virus very often. So we'll take a look at it. And again, I'm not. Sorry, not trying to be political or anything like that, but they need to look at the data and not be so fear-based on this, because I do understand you have to err on the side of caution always. You don't want to be the league that opens up and you have all of a sudden, boom, an uptick in deaths, uptick in severely ill student athletes, because then you're just donezo. Now I know one conference that doesn't care. That's the SEC. I guarantee they say they're playing. I bet if the NCAA said we're not gonna do it, you have to not play. I bet the SEC could secede and basically play their own season. Just say heck with everyone. I think they're all on board. But SEC is so much more important, or SEC football is so much more important down there than it probably is in any other part of the country, right? They take it a little more seriously. I know in Big Ten country, we're all avid college football fans, so I'm not talking about us, but in terms of importance for the region, I think SEC football is a little more important than some of the other conferences. So you might see that. Let's move on. That kind of let's segues into our next discussion. Real quick, Steve Fox, you need to look at data you have now and not what you think you will have in the future. Yeah, it's really tough to correlate right now, isn't it? It's just you see the curves, you see spikes in certain areas. It's really tough. That's why I mentioned you got a month and a half basically to change things day by day. I really don't like how if they set something in stone, you know what I mean? That's not what I like to see. I like to see them continue to analyze the data as it comes in. You're absolutely right. Day to day, it's going to change. Who knows? It might drop off. There's some good news about a vaccine earlier today that they're in the final phases of testing. That's fantastic. Who knows if that gets pushed through? You never know. They might start allowing fans. Who knows? We just don't know. The news cycle seems to just be, what I said earlier in the show is probably not relevant anymore. So who knows? Let kind of segues into our next topic, and that is, do we feel it's with conferences still in discussion at this point, and the season just over a month and a half away, with confidence level of having college football here in the fall? Let me know your guys' thoughts on this as soon as you can. In my opinion, I think there will be certain conferences that will shut. I believe the Ivy League shut down their football. Of course, not much of a moneymaker for them. So that's another big thing. You got to remember, if these conferences shut down college football, whether you agree or not, these college football programs fund so much of the athletic programs at all of these universities. I mentioned Duke and Kentucky. I mentioned Duke maybe their basketball program makes a little more money than their football program. But at the same time, their football program is still making a lot of money, right? It's still making some good cash. You look at any other university, though, I really think that it's going to be tough for the conferences to really swallow, again, unless there's something majorly terrible about fatality rates of this virus. They're going to have to say, listen, I mean, these colleges, these universities, they're going to need a football season. I know the revenue is going to be astronomically down, but you're still going to have a lot of good TV revenue. I really think that, that some schools have already they've already stated, hey, we're going to allow about 20%. Again, that could all change. But at the present time, there's some schools that said, hey, we're going to allow. Texas actually announced that they were going to allow about 50% of their stadium full. So you got to love Texas, right? And I don't disagree with that, but in my confidence, in having a football season is still about 80%. I know, like I said, I bet the SEC says heck with it. If they outlaw, if they say the NCAA says nope, we are not, all college football is forbidden. Like I said, the SEC, if they're allowed to, I don't really know the rules on that. But if they're allowed to, I bet they just say, nope, we'll just be our own league. We'll make our own sanctions. Okay, whatever. We're going to play. We need this. It's very important to the region. It's a big cash cow for the region. So I think that it's tough to say, and I don't want to, again, like you mentioned, Steve, I don't want to be premature on this with the data. They just need to analyze it. Keep analyzing it, keep giving us information on what conferences are doing to try to mitigate at the present time, because who knows, maybe everything just falls off by then. I mean, we're still a month and a half away. I know that doesn't seem like a long time, but in terms of this virus, it certainly seems like forever, right? 6-7 weeks. Oh my goodness. I mean, who knows what could happen in 6-7 weeks. Hopefully for the better it happens. Steve says Ivy League sports are on the level of intramural. Yeah, exactly right. They don't really need the sports, right? But again, you still see certain leagues, certain conferences just totally scrap the football season totally. So I don't know. Let me know your guys' thoughts on your percentage of confidence that Big Ten. How about that? How about Big Ten football will be played to some extent in the fall? Or do you think that it's going to be split up, or do you think it's going to be delayed until the spring? I know we're all just eking for college football, especially here on the M Factor, especially here on the A to G 2.0 show. So let's hope for the best and continue to analyze the data, and let's see how the conferences handle it. I know they got a lot of smart people, and I know they have the student athlete safety at heart, and I just hope that hopefully this whole thing kind of diminishes a little bit in the month and a half that we have left, and let's get some college football in, right? Go Blue. With that, thanks everyone for joining tonight to the A to G Show 2.0. Adam Amble, live from Castle Rock, Colorado. Again, make sure you share on Facebook here, and make sure to head on over to YouTube after the show and subscribe to the M Factor channel, as we have great programs like the M Factor podcast, of course, the original, right? The A to G Show 2.0 and the A Train Radio Show. Really appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Let's move on to our fourth. Since we don't have G on, we're not going to be able to do any Spitfire tonight, but let's head on over to our fourth and final topic, and that is it's been a tough sports cycle during this time. And of course it was needed for safety, shutting down everything. But there has been some pros, definitely a lot of cons, obviously for this, for professional sports and collegiate sports. So I just want to talk about some of the good things that I've enjoyed, sports-wise anyway, during this whole shutdown. And that first and foremost is I love the fact that NASCAR was running 2 races per week, and they're going to continue to do that. Actually, I know at Michigan it was just announced at MIS in the August they're actually going to run a little doubleheader for the Cup Series. So Saturday you're going to have a nice 400-mile race, 400-mile race, and then Sunday you're going to have another 400-mile race. Really cool. I know they did that at Pocono. Really good for the sport, and I'll tell you what, the ratings are through the roof. So that's another thing I liked about it. You get some of the smaller sports markets. NASCAR has always been kind of big in the television sector of things, but one thing that they've lost a lot of viewership over the years, and I know certain sports that were the MMA. Awesome viewership, almost record-setting viewership. Some of the golf tournaments, excellent top-of-the-line viewership. NASCAR for sure, top-of-the-line viewership. Heck, you got Korean baseball that they're broadcasting on ESPN every morning. I'm kind of bummed because I like watching some of my sports talk shows on the way to work, but instead ESPN has I don't really watch ESPN anymore, but ESPN I noticed had a Korean baseball league. So that's kind of a good thing that will happen. You get some of these smaller TV market sports that really kind of get to come up and shine during this, especially during the week. That's what I really enjoyed was having a NASCAR race on a Wednesday night was fantastic. So I really enjoyed that. Second thing was basically kind of the sports documentaries were fantastic. I watched every episode. Jess and I watched every episode of The Last Dance, which was fantastic. Had there been racing on at that hour, at that time, not a lot of Sunday night races for NASCAR, but at the time where we needed some basketball, right? We needed a good story. We needed some sort of sport. It brought us back to the Michael Jordan days, brought us back to the bad boy days, which was really cool. Brought back a lot of good memories. And you kind of, let's be honest, even if you weren't a big fan of Jordan, the documentary was really good. And I'll be honest, I kind of look forward to it on Sunday nights. Saturday, like, what do we get to watch before Monday heading back to work? Well, we had the old Last Dance on 2 hours, for, what was it, 2 hours for, was it 7 weeks in a row? 6 weeks in a row? Something like that. And I really enjoyed it, surprisingly. And I for one, was not a fan of Michael Jordan. So I thought it was really nice. And then, of course, on Sunday nights, they came out with the new 30 for 30s. Now, these I've always enjoyed. So, but I just was able to focus on them more. You weren't flipping back between, some MLB, Sunday night baseball. You didn't have Sunday night. Obviously, you wouldn't have Sunday night football on. It wasn't the season. But these 30 for 30s, I was really, really involved in. The 2-part Lance series was fantastic. It was one of my favorite. The Long Gone Summer was a good one with the Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa story. Just, again, bringing back great memories. And those 30 for 30s are just fantastic. So I don't think you can go wrong with watching those. But again, without having live sports, it was really, you could really just focus in on those. And that's what I think was some of the pros. Obviously, the cons, the biggest con for me was not having the March Madness. That was the worst. Baseball, I know some of you, are avid MLB watchers, avid baseball watchers, but to me, I never really was a sit down every night and watch some baseball. And I really wasn't a huge fan of NBA basketball. Even the playoffs, I would watch a game here or there. But you can bet your butt that I'm going to watch almost every game in the bubble here, starting at the end of July here. So in a couple weeks, NBA starting to report down to Orlando. We've already had a couple NBA stars. I know Westbrook was just diagnosed with COVID yesterday, I believe he came out with that. So what? Get over it. Get down there and let's play some NBA basketball. It's going to be interesting to see. I was told today, or I heard today, that some some of these NBA players, I don't know how true, I don't know how true this is from them, but some of them stated that they hadn't picked up a basketball in 3 months. I was like, how is that possible? There's no way. Tell me you couldn't find a court to go shoot on in these cities. Give me a break. The most notable one was Middleton for the Bucks. I guess he stated that. I'm like, what? How is that even possible? That's your job, and you're telling me you didn't pick up a basketball for 3 months? You got guys like LeBron out there. I guarantee he was shooting every day. You got Zion looking like a beast. You could tell he took this seriously. I was like, you know what? I'm going to play this to my advantage. Cut down. And boy, he just looks absolutely phenomenal. Because it could have went either way. He could have eat Twinkies all day in his 19, 20-year-old body and been like, yeah, well, my body can handle it. But he did. He took the right way. Good for him. I can't wait to see it. Let's see. Steve Fox, professional sports that have started have done well so far, and that's with some participants testing positive. That's absolutely correct. Jimmy Johnson tested positive for corona. He had to miss one race, and guess what? Like 3 days later, he's like, okay, all clear. So he'll be racing this weekend. All clear to race. So it's unbelievable. Also, Steve, March Madness is what I miss most also. Yeah, and I really just think that, based on I missed the Big Ten tournament because they were gearing to go. Remember, Michigan was on the court when they decided to call the Big Ten tournament. I remember that vividly. I was at work, and hopefully no one from work's watching. I was at work, but I had it on my phone on the radio, and they were warming up before they called the Big Ten tournament, and I thought that would have been interesting because Michigan just starting to again peak at kind of the right time. They had a big up and down season, but Michigan basketball true nature. I know it not Beeline, but Howard I think did a great job this year, and Michigan State obviously had a great season, and it would have been just fantastic to really see. And just to really see how that would have played out, maybe another repeat of Michigan State versus Michigan in the championship game, and then to see how they would have fared in the NCAA tournament. Steve Fox, March and April are great months for sports. Exactly. You had the Masters delayed, or the Masters delayed, and that's always a good golf weekend, right? So you had the Kentucky Derby that I know is first weekend of May, but still roughly in the same time frame. You had a lot of different sports that were kind of called it quits early or delayed. So those were kind of those are the things that I would miss most. Those were the cons that I would miss most. Not so much NBA basketball, not so much MLB baseball, but March Madness, the Big Ten tournament, and then probably the Masters and Kentucky Derby. Those are always good times. So those were something. And then just being able to turn on the TV and listen to actual sports reviews, actual sporting event reviews from like my boy Colin Cowherd, reviewing the previous night's action and whatnot. Now, I will say a lot of the sports talk radios, they did give us a lot of information on certain things like the NFL draft, Patrick Mahomes signing, which was fantastic. Those, Cam Newton, there were some good stories throughout this whole thing, I think. But I really think like sports talk shows are really just eking to get some the Big Four live sports back. I know MLS, I believe, has started, so that's good. And I think, like you mentioned last week, Steve and my brother-in-law Carl stated that the European leagues have fired up. They've been going for quite some time right now, I believe. But so yeah, that's kind of some of the things I've missed. But that'll be the end of tonight's episode 15. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Again, thanks for the comments too. It really helps me get through this and kind of extend the show a little bit. If it was just me here talking, no one wants to hear that, right? So I really appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. Again, if you're new to the show, if you haven't watched it, and if you are still watching on Facebook, make sure to hit that share button so people can watch, get those views up, and we can continue to expand on the crowd and the viewership of the A to G Show 2.0. Don't forget, again, to head on over to the YouTube M Factor channel. Again, just go to YouTube, type in the M Factor, look for the icon, and hit subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Trying to grow that YouTube channel. And again, don't forget, I will be going to put together some sort of video. I'm really expanding on my production stuff, I guess you'd say. I'm trying to get together on how we actually put this together. What's going on behind the camera here, the equipment that's used, and some of the stuff that you need to really put on a live stream a show like this, because I think you guys would really enjoy it. It's some fun stuff. So again, head on over to the YouTube channel. Don't forget also to head on over to the M Factor merch page. Don't forget there's links for both of those in the description for the show. Thanks everyone tonight. I really appreciate it. I will see you next week. Have a great weekend, everyone. Stay safe.